Big red button pressed. Bluetooth connected. Alrighty. If you are here for the 2-question code quiz, you're in the right place. Interviews for programmers are notoriously bad. I've got 2 quick stories of bad interviews I've been subjected to that I'd like to share with you before we get too far in. First time was I was interviewing with Amazon. Early round, like it wasn't a big deal. I wasn't going to get this job, and they asked me, like, it was the screener call, like, what? Tell me about big O notation. How would you use that? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, so if I gave you a function, how would you use big O notation? I'm like, never been taught that. Sorry, I wasn't classically trained with comp sci. Don't know the answer to your question. Like, well, if you had to guess, what would you do? I'm like, I don't know what that is. It's a bad question. And they were inflexible, right? And there was that time there was this dev shop here in town that gave me a long multiple choice quiz to see if I memorized PHP.NET's documentation. They were asking about the order of the arguments, and whatever, it's right there. Just go look it up. These interviews sucked. Most interviews suck. Today we're going to talk about how to make your interviews not suck. I'm Scott. I've had a lot of programming experience. I've had 5 jobs since college. Every one of them I've helped hire other people, and I've hired a lot of great people, and I still keep in touch with most of them, so that's good. This talk's pretty much 45 minutes long, so there's not a ton of time for questions, but I do want to make it useful to you, so I will slice out a couple slides as we go along. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. Behavioral interviewing, which is not what we just saw, is misused. Traditionally, interviews have been geared towards evaluating soft skills, right? Tell me about a team project where you had to work with someone difficult. I've been asked that a million times. This question only tells you if the person has dealt with a terrible person before. Spoiler, they have. The story they'll tell you is some sort of whitewashed version where they come out as a knight in shining armor every single time because everyone's the hero of their own story, right? Where do you look for inspiration is a question I've gotten before. Unless you're feeling particularly uninspired as an interviewer and you need new role models, this is kind of a useless question. Turns into a do they read the same blogs as I do question or not, which is not very useful. Or the classic, what is your greatest accomplishment? Reminds me of the Colbert bit, George W. Bush, great president or greatest president? Today we're going to talk about today, what we want to take away from behavioral interviewing is that we want to use open-ended questions for just about everything. Beyond that, whatever. With tech people, we care about not about just soft skills, but also hard skills, right? Technical skills. Trouble is that many people fall into the tech fact question trap. If you can Google the answer to the question, it's probably a bad question. Back to the whole, like, does Scott remember how to use every function in PHP by memory? No, it's a bad question. I'm still a good developer. There's this concept called transactive memory. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, all these slides are online. You don't have to take a whole lot of notes. There's a concept called transactive memory that was proposed by Daniel Wegner in 1985. It's a system where, transactive memory systems are a mechanism through which groups of people collectively encode, store, and retrieve knowledge. It's basically like tribal knowledge or institutional knowledge, but they found that in further studies later that how it relates to the internet. He asked participants to copy 40 memorable factoids into a computer, and for example, like an ostrich's eye is bigger than its brain. Okay, cool. Half the people in the experiment were told that their work would be saved on the computer, half were told that it would be erased immediately after they got done entering it. They found that those who believed the computer had saved the list of facts were much worse at remembering the facts. So how pronounced is the transactive memory effect? These graphs for the next experiment show storing details in a location. So what is that? 17% remembered the fact and where it was stored. 11% remembered the fact but not where. And then 30 and 38% only remembered the folder or remembered nothing. Right? So the point is, once you know the fact is out there to be found again, 68% of people forget the fact entirely. That's human. So deal with it. We're not hiring for non-humans. And there's links in here if you want to go read the studies. So what are some other bad questions? Gotcha brain teasers. There's also, so there's like the I'm sorry. I tried to jump ahead because I'm trying to trim time, but I'll just stop doing that. Gotcha. Brain teaser questions don't test your creativity or the ability to think outside the box. They test if you can think in one very specific, less obvious box. Even if they get it right, how is that going to turn someone who was previously a no hire into a hire? It's probably not. There's also the extrapolation brain teaser. How many piano tuners are there in New York City? We've all heard variations on this. Interesting, but it's, again, formulaic. It doesn't really tell you if they're going to be a good resource for your team. It's just ask, have they seen this kind of question before? The best version of these I've heard, which is actually really interesting to me, is how might you design a program that lets people play Monopoly with each other over the internet? It's really cool because it really gets at what's important to the person and how they break down problems. And that's way more interesting to me than have they memorized a question before. Other bad requests: manually reverse a linked list on this whiteboard, balance a binary tree. Unless you have a deeper question you're seeking the answer to, don't bother doing that exercise. Take-home assignments, I think, waste everybody's time. Interview questions that ask how to use a particular technology package or function. Why? We're all going to learn how to use new tools anyways. Getting out why to use a technology package or function is the interesting question. Other bad requests: real-world project problems are better at telling the candidate what the code base is like than telling the interview what the candidate is like. So don't say like, oh, go solve this problem. If you can work this one ticket and you'll give you temporary access to our code base, I mean, that, again, it wastes time. Trial employment week wastes the company's time and is very inconvenient for a candidate. So if you have to have a release valve, which is why a lot of people claim they do this trial employment week, make the hire and make it for 3 months, not 1 week, because they're going to stop hunting for jobs otherwise. It just is not a good use of people's time. So there's a lot of steps in hiring people, start to finish, and we're going to focus today on the 2 interview steps, screening and technical interview, but I have thoughts on all of these, of course. So like we talked about in the keynote this morning, having a rock star or a ninja or a 10x dev or a wizard, they aren't goals in your hiring process. They are poorly chosen buzzwords. Please don't use them. When you go into a hiring process, it's good to know what you're looking for, and you need to be specific, not just like, I want this great grand person. Use more specific language when you're writing your thesis of why you're hiring somebody. Maybe you have a particular set of skills you're seeking to add to your company's team. We want a generalist who can write WordPress plugins and Drupal modules, slice PSDs, manage hosting, and tie into APIs. Right, that's one job description. Or we want an expert in queue workers. Okay, that's getting pretty specific. Or we want a developer who can lead other developers and communicate clearly with stakeholders. A whole other set of responsibilities, but all 3 of those tend to be lumped into senior developers. So be specific about what your goals are when you're going to hire someone. That'll help everything else that comes after this. And it might be more, you want to have a particular style for this developer, right? You might want someone who's a defensive coder that loves 100% test coverage. Or it might be you want an offensive coder that will ship first and ask questions later. When you have these goals, you can make purposeful questions. I started using the terminology of question behind the question when thinking about the questions for an interview, but then I realized that QBQ is a book about dysfunctional organizations that I learned about when I worked at Cerner, and how they have whiny employees in them. So I started Googling for better terminology. There's Interview 5 Whys, which was an interesting Google. It led me to an interesting proposal called the 5 Hows, and there's a link at the end of this talk if you'll go read about that. It was very fascinating, but I don't have time for that. The purpose behind the question was another Google phrase. It brought me to philosophical questions on life. And the Googling of the real question brought me to this book, the Bacon book. Bacon, the real purpose of life. So I'm going to go with that, real question. So what is the real question when you're doing your interviews? And before I get into the actual questions for the screening interview, I want to set some more expectations about when you are preparing your interview question list. Don't ask an interview question without knowing why you're asking it. It should be in line with the goals you had set earlier, like what are the thesis, why am I hiring this person? So your question should be geared towards your goals. And I know the whole like mission, vision, values thing is kind of overwrought sometimes, but it's really important when you're trying to accomplish a purpose. So I recommend doing that for your hiring processes. Example questions I've used, and they're real questions that I'm going to share with you. What gets you excited about development? Of all the professions in the world, why this one? That's a question I like to ask. And it's a nice softball question. I usually use it to start off the interview because people are happy to answer it. But the real question I'm trying to get at is, are they jazzed about this? Is their heart really into this work, or are they just a clock puncher? Like, is someone just going to show up, like, minimally try, and then go home? Right? I'm not asking for people to like work stupid hours. I'm just saying, is your heart into work, or would you just be as happy being a salesperson, right? When do you find ORMs to be useful? And get some really interesting viewpoints on this, but the real question behind it is, are you comfortable with abstraction, or will you constantly be reinventing the wheel? Because you don't want someone to be reinventing the wheel. We have open source software. People are going to help you. You should use those tools that are available to you. Tell us a bit about your existing development and release process, and what do you think about it? The real question is, what is their level of comfort with speed versus risk? Because I have a very distinct opinion in my head of what I'm looking for on the speed versus risk thing. And when you ask people about testing and deployment, you get to that detail as to how they view the realm of development and what they want to do to make sure that code works or doesn't work. So this is a picture of a guy in a pink sombrero. There is a great article out there that I had to go into the web archive.web.org to get, because they took the article down. I hate how the internet degrades. But it's called the Cowboy Code in the Pink Sombrero. And these guys are comfortable, believe it or not, with changing code in production, because sometimes in their world it has to happen. But what they do to kind of mitigate that is they make whoever wants to go make a production change go grab this pink sombrero, put it on, which is the signal for everyone in the office to come stand around their desk and shoulder surf them and make sure they don't make a terrible, awful, disastrous mistake. And so their level of risk is different than, their comfort with risk is a little different than mine. I used to be that guy, but that was, some years ago, different projects. So know what your goals with your questions are, is the thesis of this part. So the screening interview, we're ready to launch in the screening interview because people have passed these first number of filters and we're ready to talk to them for the first time. On paper, this person sounds good. It's time to start the relationship formally, because you're entering into a relationship. It's like dating. You're going to have to live and work with this person daily for a long time. So start it off right. This is a first date. I recommend doing a video conference. Would you do just a phone call for your first date with a member of the opposite gender? Probably not. So do video conference if they're not physically able to be there in the office with you. Otherwise, audio only will have to do. But interpersonal / soft skills are much easier to recognize when you get all the communication cues, not just their tone. You can see like someone's nervous, like maybe they're fidgety or they're tense, or maybe they are like just not interested at all, but you can see that with their physical, not just their audio. So I usually book it for 60 minutes long just to really get to know a person, but sometimes I do cut that off early when I find that they are not someone that we are going to end up hiring. So I usually say to the person, it's going to be a 30 to 60 minute interview, so set their expectations properly. If we pull the report at 30 minutes, cool. If we make it to the 60, great, whatever. From my experience, you'll do about twice as many screening interviews as technical interviews. So if you are hiring for 2 roles, you're going to multiply that by the number of people you're going to get to that filter, and then multiply that by 2. So the other half of the filter I'll show about later. Goals of the screening interview: to get a shared understanding about the job for both parties. Make sure that they know what the job is you're offering, as well as you understand what their experience is. To just a high level of screening, get to know you kind of thing, right? So make sure they're worth the time of the rest of your team members, because you're about to maybe involve more people and it become a really expensive process. So make sure that they are worth sharing with your teammates. I like to make sure that they can get things done. That's one thing that's really important to me. And I think I get into that in one of my questions in a minute. Make sure they're the kind of person you'd be happy to interact with on a daily basis. And really important, I think, for the screening call, get and manage salary expectations in the first contact. If you're not aligned on monies at that point, you might be wasting everybody's time. So let's get into the questions for the screening interview. These 5 usually fill the entire hour for me sufficiently. Just 5 questions, because one of them takes a long time. It's this one. It's the first one. Questions for me. Because at this point, they've maybe submitted a code sample, they've submitted a resume, they've maybe written a customized cover letter. They've put a lot of effort in, and we've received all the information. And all they saw from us was like a one-sheeter about the job posting, right? So I could start off with, hey, we've asked you a lot of questions so far, but all you've heard from us in a job posting. What questions do you have for me? How can I make sure that this is the job that you want? Because I don't want to get to the end of this process, make you an offer, and you say, nah. That would be a waste of everyone's time. So let's not do that. So another way to look at this, when I'm asking, do you have any questions for me? Was it a good job posting? Did I put enough information into the job posting for it to be, for the right people to show up? Because that should be the first filter. People should be self-selecting in or out of your job based on the job posted. So if I get a lot of questions or a lot of surprises out of the what questions do you have for me, that means my job posting wasn't good. I need to go back and edit that. For the next round or whatever. So especially if there's something that everyone's wondering about, if they are asking like, well, what's the version of PHP you're on? If everyone asks that, that needs to go in the job description, right? Professional ones. I like to ask, what are you looking for professionally in this career move? And my real question here is, do they value the same things that we do? From technology, to processes, to purpose, to workplace tone. This allows them to say, this is what I value, and I hope that that's what I'm looking for too, and that helps us align. And if you kind of say yours first, they're going to just say, yeah, I like those values, I like that workplace tone, but that we don't need yes men, yes women, we need people who are actually going to be on the same page as us as to what we're trying to accomplish here, right? Bonus, when you ask the question of what are you looking for professionally in this career move, sometimes they air their dirty laundry to you from their previous jobs without you directly asking that. So they might be like, do you give people autonomy? Well, that can tell you right off the bat that they were micromanaged in some way, perhaps with good reason. Like, be aware, like, yes, there are bad managers who micromanage because they're bad managers, but there's also people who are maybe wandering in their professional life and need more guidance than otherwise. And if they feel like they're being hammered down, that's like, well, listen, opportunity for you as an interviewer, something else to follow up on. They might also let you know right off the bat that they're arrogant. There was one guy that asked what he's looking for a professional career move, and his response was, verbatim, I'm looking to share my exorbitant experience. Red flag. Red flag, red flag, red flag. That was a Matt from the keynote. He was wanting to kind of be a dictator of a development team. Not what I was looking for a collaborator. So I think is the third question, what did you own at these jobs? And my real question there is, can you get things done? This is one of the values I shared with you earlier. I want to make sure that people are able to go accomplish things and take ownership of processes. So the real question is, are you going to be able to get things done, or are you going to proactively solve problems for us, or are you going to wait to be told what to do? Are you just going to passively punch the clock? Are they going to take responsibility for the problems they're presented with? Like if you are asked to go solve a test coverage problem 3 times in a very identical fashion, maybe you're a person who takes ownership of the problem is going to go proactively look for those problems in the future, as opposed to being wait to be told the 5th and 7th and 12th time, right? These don't have any real questions behind them. They're kind of HRA stuff. We don't actually run a background check on people. So I ask people just verbally, are there any relevant convictions related to fraud, confidentiality, computers or technology, because we have data that is kind of confidential. We need to make sure that's safe, right? And are you in a role where it'd be appropriate to give a 2-week notice? Really important here, if you go down this path, you have to ask every single candidate the exact same set of questions. If you ask this of just some people, that is employment discrimination. You do not do that. The mantra of HR is you treat everyone the same. So if you're going to ask anyone this, ask everyone this. It was important to me because one time there was a guy who applied who had been convicted of hacking. I'm like, no thank you. That was important for me to know. I mean, that company was not down to spend the $35 to do a background check for a candidate that made it this far. Whatever, just do the background checks, that's another option too. Federal level gets you the hacking and fraud ones. On the 2-week notice thing, I like to ask this up front because I like to set the expectation that I want them to take their 2-week notice. Because if as a hiring manager, if you don't expect them to do that, when other hiring managers hire them other people away from you, they're going to also return the favor of not expecting that. So it's just a healthy thing to do for your own organization and the organization your team members coming from. Encourage the 2 weeks notice. It's courteous. But when you ask it here this way, that also anchors it on 2 weeks. Because so often people are like, oh, we're in the middle of this project, and I just don't feel good about leaving for like 6 weeks. Can I do that? No! The hiring process takes a month minimum. That's going to be almost 3 months from the time we decided we were going to hire someone before you arrive. We can't. We're hiring because we need help now, right? So when you anchor with 2 week notice, they have a better chance of saying yes to 2 weeks. It still happens. People ask for longer, but if you anchor with 2, you can negotiate better. And the last one, a really important one. This is the 5th question, and this one often requires a lot of context from me before I start asking the details around this. But you need to have this conversation in that first interview and make sure that expectations are properly managed. I like to go over the standard benefits package because salary is usually the only negotiable part. They said in the keynote this morning, other things are, well, you know what, HR departments hate that. It's interesting and maybe fun to try, but HR departments hate that. So as a hiring manager, I would suggest you try to just negotiate on salary. Everything else can go out the window. Because they're not going to get a higher 401k match. They might get a little more vacation, but there's probably, in most companies, a scheme by which HR assigns how much vacation you get, and it's a pain in the neck to deviate from that. So negotiate on salary if you can. And I like to ask, what are your salary expectations? And this gives people the opportunity to be frank and set their own price. And my real question here is, what do you need to be happy here? Because I don't want to get to the interview process and find out that I can't afford you, or that we aren't, you don't want to get to the end of the interview process just to find that you can't afford somebody and they can't be satisfied by you. Because when you hire someone, you want them to stick around, right? So if they say, okay, I'll take a pay cut to come work with you, well, they're not going to be happy. They're going to keep searching for a job, right? It's important to ask this as a very open-ended question because people need to be comfortable with the number that they give you. Also, another reason to ask it a very open-ended question, because in many jurisdictions it's illegal to ask what their previous salary was. So don't ask what their previous salary was. It's increasing the number of places, it's just safer to not ask what the previous salary was. Because really, that doesn't matter, right? It matters what they're willing to work for right now for you for this role. So there's a link in this slide that has the list of all the places that the laws have already been passed. Not that you really need it, just don't do it. So, as with any negotiation, don't anchor first. As the hiring manager with multiple candidates applying for the one job, you're kind of in the driver's seat of the negotiation. And I like to ask, what do you need for you to come work with us? And then wait. And don't say anything. Let the silence be pregnant. Let them feel the pressure needing to give you an answer because this is really important. Do not anchor first. If they hesitate, you could suggest, hey, you can give me a range. Because people feel more comfortable giving a range. But it's still important that they are the ones saying what they're willing to work for. Because you want to be able to be sure that they're happy. My goal in all of this is to make sure that I'm able to satisfy their needs. Security, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Have you guys heard about this autonomy, mastery, purpose thing before? Anyone? So there's a guy, Dan Pink. He's got a TED Talk and a book. It's really good. There's links in this slide. And they talk about how, as knowledge and creativity workers, we are fulfilled in our careers by having autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And autonomy, like you're able to go do what you need to do to accomplish the company's mission, right? Mastery, you're working to get better all the time. You're increasing your skill set, and you feel like you're doing good work. And purpose, you're doing it for a reason you can believe in. I mean, we can't all be working for some like really great nonprofit. That doesn't always happen. Also, there's not a whole ton of money there, right? Because it's nonprofit. So it's a lot better than saying, like, I don't want to work for the Missouri Lottery. I don't want to work for Payday Loan Company. I would not be able to get behind that purpose. I like the purpose of where I work right now. We are building apps for churches and school communities and nonprofits to help them bring all their members together and help them accomplish their vision, which is really cool. It's still a business, and I can get behind it. So my purpose is taken care of. So autonomy, master, purpose, really important. I really encourage you to go watch the TED Talk on this. But I tack onto the front of that security. That's the security, autonomy, master, purpose. Because you can't reach autonomy, master, purpose if you are insecure in your job. What I mean by that is that you feel like you're being paid market wages for your skills. Feel like as the company grows, that the company's going to help you grow. And to feel like when it's time for raises, that your boss is going to go to bat for you and make sure that you get the money that you're deserving because of your contributions, right? So all that's the security bit. Because when you don't have that security, or your employees don't have that security, when they get that LinkedIn recruiter email, they're going to be like, maybe I'll read this. Maybe I'll respond. But I want people that I'm working with to be feeling so comfortable in their security, autonomy, master, purpose that when they get that email, they just ignore it because they got better things to do and they're already doing it, right? So there's actually 3 YouTube videos in the footer of this. Really recommend checking those out. If their salary expectations are in your expected range, great. Just say, that sounds like something we may be able to work with. Thank you. Move on. If they come in lower than you expected, even better. When you do go to hire them, give them a little bit more than they were asking for. We want to win their loyalty. We want them to feel appreciated and stay around, right? So even if you're like, well, we can afford to pay, I don't know, let's say $70K, and they come in at $65K. Well, hire them at $68K because you can. That's better. But what if they come in higher? That's the hard one, right? So pick and mix from the following tactics according to your comfort level and your desires. You could drive a bargain. You could, after you've heard their dollar amount, you can say, hey, we have 60 to 80K to work with, and see what they say. If they walk, they walk. That's actually a good thing. If they were expecting to get 95K and you can't pay that, it was not a good fit from the get-go. Consider yourself lucky you figured this out at this stage of the game. You can talk about raises. You can say, hey, you're kind of coming in close to the top of that position salary range. I want you to do good work and get raises for it, but if you come in too high, I won't be able to give you raises for a long time. Because sometimes people do anchor higher than they probably warrant, right? And if they do come in at the top and they are only performing adequately, there's not an opportunity to give them a good raise. And they're eventually going to leave when you do that, right? But it is kind of illogical for a candidate to lower their stated dollar amount based on this statement. But I'm not actually expecting anyone to. What it does say, though, in a supportive way, was that was more than I can afford, right? And the last option, and this is if your organization has the money to do it, you can set expectations. You can say, that's definitely higher than I was anticipating for this role. If you're able to bring that level of value to the company, that's great, but you're really going to have to prove it to me that you're worth it. You're going to have to knock my socks off at every stage of the interview process. Because if you're commanding that kind of salary, you need to be better than I thought we were going to be able to get for the dollar amount we thought we had. But if they genuinely can make your company that much more valuable, yes, great, right? So this is the end of the screen interview. Set expectations for the next steps. Thank them for their time and say goodbye. Hour over. Try to hold it exactly to an hour. It's important to be respectful of people's times. Something that I didn't mention up front, during this whole process, take copious notes. Everything they say that's important, everything that they say that's moderately important. If they are a hire right now, yeah, I'm excited about this person, I totally want to work with them, move on to the next step. If they're anything less than totally engaging and exciting to you, if they're a maybe hire, just stop. This is explicitly a filtering process. Let the filters do their jobs. Because you don't want someone to just kind of like, and then you get to the next stage and then you hire them and then be a, You want to actually only say yes to the people who are definite yeses. If they're anything less, move on. So cool, that was the screen interview. On to the technical interview. Also 60 minutes long. Definitely use the whole time. From my experience, you'll do 2 to 3 times as many technical interviews as there are seats available. So back to the example earlier, if you had 2 roles available, that could be 6 technical interviews and 12 screening interviews. That's a lot, but that's what I found is necessary to sufficiently fill it. If you have just 1 slot, like the minimum number of screenings you should do is 4, but I would suggest 6. So I like to involve 2 to 4 other people from my team in the technical interview. They might not get to ask many questions each, but after the interview you want multiple people to have agreed that this is the right person to hire, not just you. You're not in charge of everything, you're a facilitator, right? Your team needs to also like these candidates. So consider having these people in this technical interview with you akin to like pair programming and or code reviews. You need other people's eyes and opinions. Additionally, have every interviewer in the technical interview take copious notes. It's not just you. Everyone should have their notes so they can talk intelligently about these 12. Well, so when you're doing the screen interviews, you're going to do 12 screens. You're definitely going to lose track of what each person said. And these technical interviews, they might be attending 6 of them, right? And it's easy still to lose track of who did what, who said what. So take copious notes so you can go back and refer them later. My goals for the technical interview: make sure their skill set is what they claimed it was. Are they lying to you about their skill level? Because sometimes that happens. Are they familiar with the process and or tech as you want them to be? Is their breadth versus depth in line with your expectations? And I like also to see, I like to make sure that they're smart along with gets things done, because we figure out the gets things done in the screen interview, what do they own, but now I want to also make sure that they're smart, not just can get things done. Are they capable of thinking through a hard task? So for me, these 2 goals translate into a couple simple phases. First, people introduce themselves, us, the candidate, go around the table or around the conference room, video conference, whatever. We have a question bank of like 2 or 3 pages of questions the interviewers can ask, but we have a block up at the top of the ones we ask every single candidate. The rest are just brainstorming ones. Again, consistency is key in interviewing. HR consistency is key. Ask the same questions of every candidate, at least half of them, if not all of them. So use the question bank if you have filler time, but then the code quiz. Then after the code quiz, which is usually about 15 minutes long for me, candidates ask questions of the team, fill up any remaining question time with more interview questions, and at the 55-minute mark, wrap up and set expectations of what's going to happen next after this interview. Finally, on to the code quiz. Finally, we're here, the 2-question code quiz. In all its glory, this incarnation in PHP, which is its first incarnation, I've now also translated it? Sure. Into JavaScript, Python, Objective-C, Swift, Java, a few others too. The concepts apply and for the 2 things I'm looking for, right? If you need copies of this, I think Andrew and I both have access to the repository. He started the repository and I started to fill it. He added the Python ones. I said Andrew, but I didn't say his last name. I'm sorry. I'm struggling to remember right now. It starts with the K. He gives a presentation in the next block. Kebby. Yes, Andrew Kebby. He has access to this repository as well. If you don't have access to him or me, just contact me or just copy paste this, whatever. We've got a lot of different versions of it. As always, there are real questions behind each of these code questions. Very important detail, each question of these 2 questions gets 5 minutes on the timer, more on this in a bit. Question 1, sum the values in this array. The real question, do you even code, bro? Because some people don't. Some people don't, they're like, I've had people copy paste stuff from Stack Overflow that was so obvious it was a Stack Overflow copy paste because the variable names were weird and wrong and it didn't work, right? Some people cannot even pass this simple sum an array question. It's super basic, just iterate the array. If they fail this question, don't even bother with the second question. Probably end the interview immediately because this is the table stake to make sure that they actually know how to program. Once you've done that, like we can learn all sorts of things, but this is the proof in the pudding, right? Sometimes they'll just tell me that they've Googled the answer. They think that they can just find the answer out there to this code quiz, which I mean it's indexed at this point, but but like people sometimes announce, yeah, I had to Google the answer to this question. Seriously. So if this question, there's an answer. One of the several ways it can be done. There's a many. If it takes more than 3 minutes, they are probably a fail. It's not that hard of a question. The faster they finish this kind of mundane task, the faster they're going to finish all of the other mundane tasks that have to be done in the process of making a complex application, right? Write down their time in your notes. How long did it take them on that stopwatch you started when you said go? It matters, and sometimes I had my most recent hire. He actually took the full 5 minutes for this, but it was because he was writing unit tests for this function. I'm like, you know what? I dig that. I dig that you write unit tests for an interview quiz question. Thank you, hire. So nothing's a hard and fast rule, but you get at what people are thinking when they do this, right? So write down that time, it matters. If they respond with a native function like PHP's array sum after 30 seconds, they probably Googled the answer. Ask how they would have answered if they didn't have array sum available to them. You don't necessarily have to send them back into the timed process of coding, just talk it through at that point. If they're truly replying with array sum, they would have probably done it in 10 seconds, as opposed to 30 to 60 seconds. So just think it through with what their responses are. If they respond with an actual loop, great, move on. If they get fancy, pull out an array walk, great, move on, doesn't matter, move on. Write down the time. Question 2. We've already finished question 1. Question 2. Feel free to say, most people don't finish this question in the time allotted, so feel free to do the same. We'll just check in at time and talk through your next steps. Because most people don't. Some people do. Question, uppercase the values in this nested array. The real question, can you handle abstraction with ease, in this case, recursion? And of course, we have to have a relevant XKCD comic. Yep. Then there's another relevant XKDC comic. This one is about building HO scale models in your basement and how then you have to build a model of the model and so on. It's impossible to nest more than 6 HO layouts because you get down to the atomic level. My favorite recursion joke, Googling recursion, did you mean recursion? Hang on a second. Crap. Okay, that's enough. Back to the code quiz. The question, uppercase the values in this nested array. The real question, can you handle abstraction with ease? In this case, recursion. I'm stuck again. Dang it. All right, there we go. Wow. When we're asking about recursion, I'm asking about because even though it's an anti-pattern, it requires deeper level of abstract reasoning than just normal programming tasks, procedural stuff. Joel Spolsky, good book, great series of blog posts that made this book. A lot of my thoughts are informed by the content in that book. He points that questions involving pointers also meet this need. And to direct quote him, I've come to realize that understand pointers in C is not a skill, it's an aptitude. For some reason, most people seem to be born without the part of the brain that understands pointers. That's the source of all the famous interview questions you hear about reversing a linked list or detect loops in a tree structure. So I said earlier those are bad questions. They are bad questions if you don't know why you're asking them. If you are using it to detect if people can do abstract reasoning, maybe it's good, but there might be other options. You know, I can't go all that far back. This question, number 2. So this, yep, I already said that. So back to our question. If they finish it in less than 5 minutes, sweet. It's a hard question. Write down their time. Hire them. Cool. If they're still going at 5 minutes, call time. I usually say pencils down because it's a joke, right? The call time is talk through what they've gotten so far and figure out what their next steps were. Usually people are a little bit flustered at this point. That's okay. That's why we tell them most people don't finish. And I like to write down a letter grade on both quiz answers. So because it's really hard to come back and grok this when you've done 6 technical interviews. I like to look at this and say, you know, this one, I give this one like a B+. Or if they did it a fancier way, maybe I give them an A-. But to get a passing grade, like anything better than D- or better than F, I suppose, they have to show the function calling itself. So like this has to be here somewhere, whether or not they get the loops and the if-else's right and all that stuff. It has to show it calling itself in some way or using a recursive function, array walk, recursive, etc. Just saying the word recursion isn't enough for me. It might be for you, but that's been my experience. Oftentimes after the interview is over, I'll take where they were and see how long it takes me to get their answer to working, to a correct answer. This lets me know how close they were. Can I fix it in 10 seconds? Can I fix it in a minute and a half? There's a big difference in those two, right? Because sometimes when you look at how close it is, it's a little deceiving. When you actually get in there and try to make it work, it really tells you how close they really were, what their thought processes were. So that's it. Round out the rest of the interview with questions from your question bank. Call it good. Get feedback from your interview team. Immediately write it down. TLDR, have goals for everything you do. Design all the parts around these goals. Your goals might not be the same as my goals. I don't care. But know why you're asking every interview question. You have basically 2 hours of talking to a person before you decide whether you spend the next many years with them. So figure it out. Be purposeful. Be intent with your questions. Any questions from you guys on any aspect of the interview process, but hopefully about the interviews? Cool. There's all that stuff. I've got other links in here that I would recommend you looking at. hiringengineersbook.com/post/trouble-hiring. It's some really good information on when you like unblocking yourself when you're not finding the right people. This is the thing about the 5 hows I mentioned. Go look at that. And you can find all of that stuff here. I'm at Aware 3 right now, 8-week career. That's us. We're hiring not for software developers right now, sadly, but we're still hiring for product manager and a office manager and a sales manager, but we are growing like crazy. We will probably have jobs be posted soon. So check us out there, slides.com/Scott Connerly for the slides. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your conference.